Hello, and in this video we're looking at factors and multiples. We'll do, even though it says factors first, we'll do multiples first. Multiples are just like the times table for the number. So the first multiple of 8 is actually 8, because you always count 1 times, like the 1 multiple. The first multiple is just timesing by 1, so 8, and then you just keep adding 8, basically, 2 times 8, 16, 3 times 8, 4 times 8. The only problem you can have if you list out multiples like this is if you make a little foolish mistake, just a silly trip up. If I had just had a brain fart and put 14 here, and then I do the rest by just adding 8, you're going to put 22, you're going to put 30, you're not going to think about it. These are correct adds of 8, but because we made one mistake early on, it bombs out the whole question. So just be careful when you write out a list of multiples. Just check each time carefully. And maybe your last one, you think, well, it's the 4th multiple, so just do on the calculator or in your head 4 times 8, and if that is 4 times 8, then you've likely not made a mistake down the line. Same thing, multiples of 12, you're going to say 12, 24. Just got to remember that the first multiple is itself. 36, 48, 22, 44, 66, etc. 24, 48. It's just saying the times table of these numbers. What's the next one? 72 perhaps, 36, and then 72, and then I don't know, 108 maybe, and so on and so forth. Okay, same for 75. The first multiple is itself, 1 times, 2 times, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's multiples, and there is such a thing called the lowest common multiple, and the lowest common multiple is the smallest number that is a multiple of both of your numbers. So the lowest common multiple of 8 and 12, you just look down the list and say, okay, what's the first number in both? So the first number, the lowest number, common, so in both, in the list of multiples. That's why it's called lowest common denominator. And of course here it's 24. It's the first number in both lists. So the lowest common multiple of 8 and 12 is 24. Okay, if you're asked to find any other lowest common denominator, then that's all you do. There are other methods to do that, but if you're writing out lists of multiples and then you're asked what's the lowest common denominator of 12 and 24, well, 24 is in both, so that's the lowest common denominator. And it doesn't matter that that's one of the numbers I started with. That's okay. If the other number divides into it, then this number can be the lowest common denominator. That's absolutely fine. Okay, if you need a moment, you want to pause the video and let that sink in, that's absolutely fine. But otherwise, I'm going to flick the eraser over all of this and talk about factors instead. Now, factors are kind of like the opposite of multiples. Multiple is like timesing it up, like times it by 1, times 2, times 3, times 4, making it bigger by, increasing by that number each time. Add 8, add 8, add 8. Okay, whereas factors are numbers that divide into our number, rather than numbers that ours divides into. It's numbers that divide into our 8. And you can just list them up. You can just be like, oh, well, 3 goes into 24, and 6 does, and 8 does. The problem with just listing them off the top of your head is very easy to miss some out. So my advice is always to do factors, if you want a list of factors, in pairs. So you start with 1. It's always 1 times the number. That's the easy one. Every number has got 2 factors apart from 1, which has just got 1 because it's 1 times 1. But otherwise, you can always start with 1 times itself. That will always work. And then you just move up this number. So from 1, you try 2. And yes, 2 does go in. It goes in 4 times. And then you would try 3, but 3 doesn't go in. So can't have that. And then 4, well, we've got a 4 in the list already, so I know I can stop. I know I've got every single factor here. There's 4 of them for 8. 1, 2, that's a 2, sorry, 4, and 8, if you wanted to list them out. Okay? It just means that we're not going to make a mistake and accidentally miss something. So same again, 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4, 4, oh, I've already got 4. I can stop there. I've got 6 factors. 1 times 22, 2 times 11, 3 doesn't go, 4 doesn't go, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 doesn't go, all of those don't go, 11 does go, but we've already got it, so we can stop there, and there's 4 factors. It's just the same for all of them. You just start with 1 times, try the next number, 2 times, yes, 3 times, yes, that works, 4 times, yes, 5 times, no, 5 times does not go, 6, we've got, stop there. 36 is an interesting one, because when you work out the factors, well, let's do it, 36, 2 times 18, I believe, 3 times 12, 4 times 9, 5 doesn't go, 6 times 6. So when you list out the factors here, of course, our pair has to have 2 6s. But if you list out the factors, you wouldn't write that twice. You'd just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 9, 12, 18, 36. So if you look, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 factors, okay, an odd number. And 36 has an odd number of factors, and as does any square number. Because if you end in this sort of number times itself, well, that's fine, that gives you the pair. They always come up in pairs, but if it's 6 times itself, well, then you can't have a 6 as a factor twice. It only counts as 1 factor, which means you've got all these pairs and then 1 odd factor. And that's true for any square number, because it has that repetition. It will have an odd number of factors. Okay, and I'm not going to bother with 75. You can do that one if you feel inclined. And just like before we had the lowest common multiple, we can have the highest common factor. There's no point doing the lowest common factor, because the lowest common factor is always 1, because 1 goes into any whole number. So that would be boring. We want the biggest number that goes into both. So again, let's look at 8 and 12. The highest common factor is the highest number in both lists. So 1 is in both lists, 2 is in both lists, is 4? Yes, 4 is in both lists. 8 is not. So the highest factor we've found in both lists is 4. So highest common factor of 8 and 12 is 4. Okay, what about 22 and 36? Well, 1 is in both, 2 is in both, but 11 doesn't come into here, nor does 22. So actually the highest number in the highest common factor for 22 and 36 is 2. And if they're co-prime, that means that they don't share any factors other than 1, of course. Then 1 can be the highest common factor if they're completely unrelated and don't share any factors. That's absolutely fine. Likewise, before we had a multiple where one of the numbers was the lowest common multiple, you can have that as well. If you say what's the highest common factor of 8 and 4, well, 4 goes into both, goes in once and twice. So you can have a highest common factor of one of the numbers that you're testing, just like you can do the same with the lowest common multiple. Okay, so that's a quick look at how to work out multiples, which is just to keep adding on the same number. Yeah, just work out the times table. Where 1 times 75 is 75, 2 times is 150, 3 times, and you just keep either timesing by the next number or adding 75. If you want the factors, stick to pairs. Yes, and then you're not going to miss any out by, all the ones we had here. Hard to get them if you're randomly skitting around, but if you start at 1, 2, 3, 4, you're just going to count up and write them down if they exist. Lowest common multiple, highest common factor, there's better ways of finding those, I must say, but that's for another video. If you have got a big old list and you're asked what is the highest common factor, just look for the highest number in both, or indeed the lowest number in both if it's for lowest common multiple. Any other questions, pop them down in the comments, but otherwise, ta-ra for now.